Sir, can we start, sir? It is 6 o'clock.
Yes.
Good evening. A warm welcome to all of you to the webinar series hosted by Advocates Association, Bengaluru. We have with us today Mr. K.G. Raghavan, Senior Advocate, High Court of Karnataka. Sir, we are elated to have you with us today. Welcome to the webinar. Now, let me introduce our beloved speaker. Mr. K.G. Raghavan enrolled as an advocate in the year 1976. He hails from a family of lawyers. His father, Mr. Justice K.R. Gopi Vallabha Iyengar, became a High Court judge after a vast practice of 4 decades. Mr. Raghavan started his practice with Mr. S. Shivaswamy, who is the son of former Chief Justice A.R. Somna. Mr. Raghavan was a senior partner with Dua Associates, a noted national law firm. He has vast practice in the field of civil, commercial, constitutional areas of law and has appeared before several high courts and Supreme Court of India. He is designated as a senior advocate by the High Court of Karnataka. Sir, once again, on behalf of Advocates Association Bangalore, I extend a warm welcome to you. Over to you, sir.
At the outset, thank you very much for requesting me to be a part of this webinar series organized by the Advocates Association. It is indeed creditable that the Advocates Association has embarked upon a project of this kind. As all of you will agree, the legal profession, the foundation is knowledge. And it is necessary for every one of us at whatever stage of the profession we may be, whether we are juniors or whether we have practiced for some time in the profession and therefore become seniors, we always have to keep abreast of the law. There is nothing like saying, I know the law. Law is an ocean and each one of us know a small drop in that ocean. It is towards the acquisition of knowledge that the Advocates Association has to spend time, especially now when we have a little more time on our hand, towards pursuit of knowledge. The fee that we earn by arguing a case in court will be spent. We will, after some time, forget the client for whom we have appeared for. And possibly, in many circumstances, we would not have even seen the face of the client. But what remains with us forever is the knowledge. And therefore, I cannot overemphasize the importance of what the Advocates Association is now doing. Thank you very much, therefore, for doing what you're doing and also inviting me to be part of this wonderful endeavor. Having said so, let us now come to the subject of today's webinar, namely force majeure and contracts. Contract Act and its provisions can be analyzed and bifurcated into 3 categories. You have provisions in chapter 1, 2, and 3, a part of 3, which relates to the formation of contracts. It tells us the qualifications required of the parties to form a contract, their competence, what can be the subject matter of the contract, what cannot be the subject matter of the contract, and it also tells us the process in which a contract can be formed by the parties. After a contract has been lawfully formed, we come to the second stage of contract law, namely the performance of the contract. That is elaborated in chapter 4 of the Contract Act. In the course of performance, there can be breaches, and it is necessary that the party who has committed a breach of contract is held to the bargain. To hold a party to the bargain under a contract, two remedies are provided by law. One is specific performance, which is governed by the law relating to specific performance contained in the Specific Relief Act, and the award of damages, which is governed by Chapter 6 of the Contract Act. Every one of the provisions of the Contract Act relating to formation, performance, and breach are interlinked. It is not possible to look at any one of these clauses in isolation. In the matter of performance of a contract, the assumption is that there is a valid contract which has been formed. In other words, it complies with the requirements of chapters 1, 2, and part of 3. Given that the parties embark upon performance, in the course of performance, there may be some difficulties which the parties may face in the matter of fulfilling their obligations. Some may be on account of the default of one or the other of the parties to the contract. The other may be for a reason which is not owing to the default by any one or more of the parties to the contract. We are now dealing in this webinar the latter aspect of the problem, namely where a party is prevented from performing his obligations under the contract on account of a factor which is beyond the control of the party. That is what in law is called force majeure. Force majeure is a French term. In fact, it is derived from a Latin phrase, vis major. In other words, it is a factor which is superior, a superior force. That is the literal meaning of the word force majeure. A force which is superior to the parties, which has prevented the party from performing his obligations undertaken under a contract. Such force majeure can happen on account of various reasons. One, it could be an act of God. There could be a cyclone, there could be an earthquake, there could be a fire which has destroyed the whole purpose or the whole object of the contract, thereby made the performance of the contract impossible. Secondly, there could be an intervention by the government by way of a law, which prevents the performance of the obligations undertaken by the parties under a contract. Third, there could be an extraneous factor like a civil strife or a strike or a civil commotion, which is again beyond the control of the parties. All this may result in the contract not being performed by one or the other parties. In such a situation, what should be done to regulate the relationship of the parties so that neither of the party is put to damage and the damage that is caused to either of the parties is minimized? That is the whole concept of force majeure. You will not find this term force majeure mentioned in the Contract Act. But provisions relating to aspects which make the performance impossible are found in the Contract Act, and I will deal with it separately. When the parties are forming a contract, they are entitled to set out in the contract the various obligations which each of the other. So, providing for the obligations which are to be performed by one in favor of the other, the contract can also provide for a situation or a remedy as to what is to happen if one of the parties is not able to perform his obligations towards the other on account of a force majeure situation. Force majeure is a contractual term. It is not a consequence arising out of law. Parties are at liberty to recognize that these are the events which we consider as force majeure. And the consequence of force majeure can be set out in the contract. And it should be set out in the contract. It is not something that flows out of law. The force majeure, the content of it, and the consequences of force majeure have to be contractually agreed between the parties and provided for in the contract. Invariably, you will find that contracts define what is force majeure. The contract will tell us what is to happen if there is a force majeure event. Maybe a contract can provide that if there is a force majeure event, a party is entitled to extension of time without being liable to pay any damages or compensation. Contract can provide that if there is a force majeure event and the performance of the contract is delayed, the party is entitled to an enhanced payment for performance of the work beyond the stipulated period in the contract. A contract may provide that if on account of a force majeure event, performance is delayed beyond a particular time, the contract can be treated as rescinded by the parties. In other words, neither of the parties have any claim. The concept of force majeure is actually a risk allocation clause. It has to be distinguished from the doctrine of frustration. In fact, there is some confusion that has been created in the matter of application of the concept of force majeure and the concept of frustration. Sometimes we all think that force majeure and frustration are one and the same. The fact of the matter is that force majeure is different from frustration, and I will elaborate on this a little while later. Force majeure is a risk allocation clause as incorporated in a contract. Whereas frustration, which is a concept set out in section 56 of the Contract Act, results in discharge of contract. The consequences are very different, and we will look at it a little while later. Now, how did the law relating to force majeure evolve? Way back in 1647, the English court in the famous case of Paradine versus Jane came up with an absolute proposition that if a person binds himself by contract to do a particular thing, he cannot escape liability for damages on the basis that as the events turned out, the performance is either futile or even impossible. Therefore, that is one end of the spectrum where a party was held to his bargain, and there was no question of one party who had entered into a contract coming up with any excuse to be relieved of his obligation to perform his part of the contract. Then after, we have the famous case of Taylor versus Caldwell, which has been referred to by the Supreme Court in the judgment in Energy Watchdog, which I shall refer, where the Supreme Court, where the English court, which has now been accepted by the Indian court also, that there is a case for discharge of contract owing to impossibility or frustration on the basis of the erosion of the fundamental bargain between the parties. Now, please mark the words fundamental erosion of fundamental bargain between the parties. This takes us to the fundamental and first principle of contract, namely that a contract is the product of what is called as consensus ad idem, that is meeting of the minds. If the parties have agreed to do certain acts towards each other on the basis of a certain agreed fact situation, and that fact situation has changed, is it equitable or just to say that even though the fact situation might have changed, the parties must still be held to the bargain? English courts, on the principle of equity, came to the conclusion that such a clause, such a contract can be avoided on the ground of equity. It is unjust, English court said, to hold a party to a bargain when the bargain has been made on the basis of a certain predicated set of circumstances. If something which was not in the contemplation of the parties at the time when the contract was made has happened, which has rendered the bargain very different from what was originally agreed, the question before the courts was as to whether it is just and equitable that the party must be held to the bargain in spite of the fact that the circumstances have so changed, which makes the performance something very different from what was agreed. English court, in the famous case of British Move It News, Lord Denning's judgment said, yes, it is permissible. That was overruled by the Court of Appeal in England, and then said there is no provision under law where you can relieve a party on some vague plea of equity. All these controversies surrounding frustration, which is different from force measure, is academic so far as India is concerned, because the Supreme Court has recognized that the entire law relating to frustration so far as India is concerned is comprised in Section 56 of the Contract Act. We will analyze Section 56 a little later. The concept of force measure as such was summed up by the US Supreme Court in a very interesting case, namely Day versus the United States. The Supreme Court of the United States summed up the concept of force measure in the following manner. One who makes a contract never can be absolutely certain that he will be able to perform it when the time comes. And the very essence of it is that he takes the risk within the limits of his understanding. But when the scope of the understanding is fixed, that is merely another way of saying that the contractor takes the risk of the obstacles to that extent. Therefore, if the contract does not have a force measure clause, then the only remedy for a party who is faced with an uncontemplated turn of events is to rely upon Section 56 of the Contract Act. And there, the party will have to satisfy the requirement of what is called as impossibility of performance, which is a higher threshold. But if you want to provide that even in other circumstances like a strike or a civil commotion or an epidemic, as we are now faced with, there should be a relief that is given to a party on account of non-performance. Then the contract must provide for a clause relating to relieving a party of his obligation on account of a force majeure, defining what is force majeure, and the consequences of a force majeure event happening. These are all contractual terms. Force majeure, therefore, is a contractual remedy as contrasted with Section 56 of the Contract Act, which is the law relating to frustration in India. The force majeure clause can be of various kinds. It can list out the events that the parties agree. Even there, please see that the content of a force majeure clause is also a bargain between the parties. The parties are entitled to list out the events which they think should be understood as force majeure in the contract, and then the parties can say, if the force majeure event happens, these are the consequences. Another broad way in which a force majeure clause can be worded in a contract is not to set out a force majeure events like strike, civil commotion, earthquake, or epidemic, or governmental law, or a court order. Without setting out any of those specifically, it is possible to say that anything that happens which is not in the contemplation of the parties at the time when the contract is made can be said to be a force majeure event. In that event, it becomes more onerous on a party because that party will have to establish before the court that the event that has happened is something which was not in the contemplation of the parties at the time when the contract was made. In the former case, where you set out the events like strikes, civil commotion, etc., it is simply a question of pointing out that at that point of time there was this event that happened, and therefore force majeure clause in the contract has kicked in, and the consequence of force majeure has to be applied. Force majeure clause, being a part of the contract, has to be interpreted harmoniously with the other terms of the contract. It is possible that while the contract sets out the various force majeure events, some other clauses of the contract may provide for a compensation or a price variation, as we call it, that is a price variation clause, in the event of a force majeure event happening. Therefore, the contract has to be read as a whole in order to find out as to what was the understanding of the parties when they introduced a force majeure clause. Not only should the contract provide for what is a force majeure event, the contract should also provide the consequences of the force majeure event. It can provide for, as I indicated, for damages. It can provide for termination of the contract. It can provide for a price adjustment. It can simply provide for an extension of time. There are several varieties of force majeure clauses which are incorporated into the contract depending upon several factors. A contract can be for the performance of one act. In other words, it can be a contract for performance of a single event. Contract can be for the performance of several acts over a period of time. Repeated supplies. A contract can be for performance of a single act over a long period of time. Like, for example, a construction contract. A contract can be for performance of an act where time is of the essence of the contract. In certain circumstances, time may not be the essence of the contract. In each of these cases, it is important that we read the force majeure clause along with the various other terms of the contract. Let us take, for example, in order to understand the point that I am just now making, let us look at it with an example. If A enters into a contract with B, under which B agrees to supply certain goods on a particular date, and on the date on which the goods have to be supplied, a force majeure event has happened, and therefore B is not able to supply the goods to A on that particular date. Can B simply say that because I am not able to supply the goods on the day I agreed to supply, because of the happening of a force majeure event, I should be relieved of my obligations to perform the contract? If we simply read the force majeure clause, the answer could be yes. I was supposed to supply the goods on a particular day. On that particular day, a force majeure event happened. Therefore, the clause provides that the consequences of force majeure will happen, and therefore I did not supply. But there may be another clause in the contract which entitles the buyer to extend the time for effecting supply if at the choice of the buyer. And suppose in the example I gave you, suppose A says, well, Mr. B, I understand that you're not able to supply the goods on the particular date because of a force majeure event. Well, I am willing to wait. Please treat the date of supply as having been extended, which extension is also provided for as part of a contractual right under some other part of the contract. Now, this is where the force majeure clause has to be read along with the other terms of the contract. And therefore, merely because a force majeure has happened, it does not mean that B can say, well, I don't want your extension of time. I am simply going to absolve myself of performing the obligations under the contract. That is not possible, and one has to therefore read the force majeure clause along with the various other terms of the contract. Having said that, is the mere happening of a force majeure event sufficient to relieve a party of his obligations towards other party? Now let us take an example. There is a construction contract for constructing a road. After the contract is signed, there is a court order which prohibits the construction of the road. Can the employer say, there is a court order, therefore I am not obliged to have the road constructed by you, Mr. Contractor? Can the mere presence of a court order prohibiting the construction of a road be a ground for the employer to say, I am now relieved of my obligations under the contract, and therefore you have no right, Mr. Contractor, to insist that this contract must be performed and the road must be constructed by you? Simply put, such a contention is not available. For the purpose of an effective shelter to be taken by any one of the parties under a force majeure clause, one of the critical factors is what is called as causation. Causation simply means, did the force majeure event prevent or prohibit the performance of the contract? Now let us take the example that I had just now given. Let us assume that after the contract for construction of road has been entered into, there is a court order which says that the road shall not be constructed, or the acquisition cannot be gone through. It may be true that the court order prevented the construction of the road during the period of the contract. But if on the date on which the site had to be handed over to the contractor, the employer did not have legal right over the site at all. There were so many other obstacles which were not beyond the control of the employer, but which the employer failed to remedy and provide for the site being made available to the contractor for construction of the road. The impediment for construction was not really the court order. The party himself defaulted in performing the part of the contract. In other words, the party did not provide the site to the contractor for construction. Therefore, independent of the court order, a default had already been committed. Therefore, it cannot be said that merely because a force majeure event has happened, automatically the force majeure clause will apply. You have to show what is called as a causal link. There are two interesting cases which I want to place before you with respect to this causation. In 1920, there was a decision of the King's Bench in England in what is called as Lubopin versus Richard Crispin. This is what is called as a fish case. Two contracts had been entered into between the parties. Under the contract, Crispin had agreed to sell 2,500 packed cases of salmon fish to the other party. The cans were not available from the canner. Then it was not possible for Crispin to sell the canned fish to Lubopin, and therefore the contract provided a force majeure clause to the effect that in that event the contract will stand cancelled. As I indicated, there were two contracts with similar wordings. What happened with respect to the first contract was the fish under both the contract, in fact, the fish had to be packed in half-pound tins. Under the first contract, there was a defect in the tins, and therefore the packing was suspended. This was a force majeure strictly within the terms of the clause. That is, non-availability of cans for packing fish. Now, on account of the defect in the quality of the tin, the packing was suspended. By the time the fresh stock of tins came, the supply of fish had exhausted. Therefore, the question of supplying fish in packed half-pound tins did not arise. There was a default. In the second contract, instead of supplying tins in half-pound tins, the fish was packed in 1 pound tins, because at that point of time, half-pound tins were not available. By the time the half-pound tins came, the stock of fish were exhausted. And therefore, the second contract also could not be performed. Now, the supplier relied upon the force majeure clause and said, I am not able to perform because of the fact that tins were not available and this is a force majeure event. The court rejected the argument of force majeure. The court said that you procured defective tins in respect to the first contract, and therefore your remedy, if at all, is against the supplier of the tins. Insofar as the second contract is concerned, it was an error of judgment. You should have ensured that at the right time, half-pound tins were available. And since the non-availability of tins was not the cause for default, it was your error of judgment, you cannot take the plea that there is a force majeure and therefore you are relieved. That is one case. The second case is what is called as the classic maritime case. This is also a judgment of the King's Bench. This is called the iron ore case. There was a contract between a ship owner and a charterer. The charterer agreed to supply and load 59 shipments of iron ore for transportation from Brazil to Malaysia. The loading could have been done from one of two ports, Port 1 and Port 2. In Port 1, Mr. A was the sole supplier. In Port 2, Mr. B was the sole supplier. But the fact of the matter is that no supplies at all came from A, and because of a dam burst. And no supply also came from B. So in one case, the A did not supply because of dam burst. In the second case, there was a default by B. The court came to the conclusion that the charterer could not take the plea of force majeure so far as the owner of the ship is concerned, because it was possible for the owner to load the ship with the cargo from B instead of A. The default committed by B was not a force majeure event. And therefore, even though there was a force majeure event so far as A is concerned because of dam burst, the owner could have loaded the ship by enforcing his right against B, who had undertaken to load the ship. Merely because B was unwilling to fulfill his part of the contract, that did not relieve the obligation of the owner. And therefore, it was held that the owner was liable because the owner had failed to have the ship loaded. Now, that is what is called as causation. And this becomes very critical in respect of many engineering and construction contracts. Let us take a situation where a contractor says, I am not able to perform my part of the contract because of a civil strife or a strike, or as we are now facing on account of a lockdown. If the work has to be commenced on a particular date, on that day there are any of these difficulties, yes, technically it is force majeure. But if it is proved by the employer that even if the lockdown was not there on that particular day, even if the strike was not there on a particular day, even if the civil commotion was not there on a particular day, still you did not have your men and machinery ready for the performance of the contract. Therefore, what has the force majeure event got to do with the performance of your obligation. In any event, you could not have performed your contract. That is the core and essence of the proof of causation. You must show that but for the force majeure event, the party would have been able to perform its obligation. Force majeure event alone is not sufficient to cause non-performance. If it is one of the reasons amidst several reasons for failure to perform, it could be one of the reasons, but for the purpose of taking shelter under a force majeure clause, it should be the only reason. It cannot be one of the reasons. Maybe the other reasons were the default of the party. That is the important aspect of causation. Now, another angle. This is very relevant in the context of the present situation, namely the pandemic that we are all facing. You all know that in March of 2020, a notification has been issued under the Disaster Management Act declaring lockdown. And that was extended from time to time, and now some states have continued to have the lockdown. Now, the mere fact that there is a lockdown, which is a force majeure event which has been set out in the contract, is it enough to relieve a party of his obligations under the contract? I already told you that it should be the cause. It can't be one of the causes. Now, another question that arises is, could you have performed this contract remotely? Now that we have this work from home concept, could you not have said, okay, even if you're not able to leave your home, having regard to the technology that is available, could you not have performed your obligations under the contract that you have entered into with me, especially with respect to technology contracts, from your home? So how did the pandemic, how did the lockdown affect the performance of the contract? That is one of the important aspects of causation. Now, suppose a contract had to be completed before February of 2020. On account of certain delays attributable to the contractor, the work has not been completed before the deadline. By the time the work could be completed beyond the deadline of February 2020, lockdown came in March of 2020. Can a party say, because of the lockdown, I'm not able to complete it, and therefore I am entitled to take shelter under the force majeure clause? The answer is a clear no, because you were supposed to have completed it in February 2020. If you had completed it on time without any default on your side, the lockdown would not have affected you. Because of your own default, you could not complete it, and this supervening event, namely the lockdown, cannot come to the aid of a defaulting party. If a default has occurred even prior to the force majeure event, the subsequent happening of the force majeure event does not in any manner relieve a party of his obligations. He will be liable for damages under the provisions of the contract or under Section 73 of the Contract Act. Now, having noticed the importance of causal link and also the harmonious construction of the various provisions of the contract, there is another important aspect so far as force majeure is concerned. And this is provided for in several contracts. Contracts invariably provide for the method by which a force majeure event can be pleaded by a party. It will invariably require that the party who is faced with a force majeure event must notify the other party that such and such a force majeure event has happened, which has come in the way of my performing my obligations. Therefore, please note that the consequence of force majeure contained in the contract has now become applicable. And the contract also invariably provides that after the force measure has ceased, the party who is taking shelter must also notify the party saying the force measure has now ceased and I will now continue the work. If this requirement of notification, which may be provided in several contracts and many contracts provide for it, is not complied with, then a party cannot take shelter under the force measure clause. The reason is only simple. Force measure is not law. Force measure is not a consequence of something stated in the Indian Contract Act. Force measure is a bargain which the parties have entered into. Courts have to give effect to the whole of the bargain as agreed to between the parties. The court does not have any discretion to say, well, some part of the bargain I will give effect to, I will ignore or I will condone the other part of the bargain. The other part of the bargain being that there should be notification of the force measure event. So therefore, the courts do not have the power to relieve a party of the bargain which they have entered into. The whole of the bargain has to be enforced. If you want to take shelter under a force measure clause, you have to follow the procedure that has been prescribed under the contract for taking shelter under a force measure clause. Now, a general principle in the case of force measure, in the absence of any specification of what should be the consequence of force measure, general principle is that the loss lies where it falls. That is, each party has to bear his loss. It is something similar to what the courts say, each party to bear their own costs. Like that, the general presumption in the case of force measure is that the loss lies where it falls. To this general principle, there are three exceptions. The first exception is the cause of the loss is not the force measure event, but other party's breach. If the cause of the loss is the breach and not the force measure event, then this principle, loss lies where it falls, will not apply. The second is where the force measure is covered by another risk allocation clause, which provides for compensation. For example, we have in several contracts the price variation clauses. So that clause will be an exception to this general principle, namely loss lies where it falls. This is the second exception. The third exception is, of course, where the force measure clause is very limited in its scope. This is the third reason why the general principle of loss lies where it falls will not apply. Now that we have seen the contours of a force measure clause in a contract, which, as I indicated, is a bargain of the parties as recorded in the contract, it could be either expressed or it could be implied. We now have to contrast it with the doctrine of frustration. There is a lot of confusion on that. In this regard, it is relevant to refer to three provisions of the Contract Act, namely Section 56, Section 32, Section 65, and Section 73 of the Contract Act. The general law of frustration, as in England, is not applicable in India, because the Supreme Court, in the case of Satyabrata Ghosh and in Alopi Prasad, have come to the conclusion. Satyabrata Ghosh is 1954 Supreme Court 44 and Alopi Prasad is 1960 Supreme Court. Both these judgments have held that the entire law relating to frustration, insofar as India is concerned, is governed by Section 56 of the Contract Act. Beyond Section 56, there is no common law principle on the basis of which a party can be relieved of his obligations under the contract unless, of course, there is a force majeure clause. And as I indicated, 56 applies in a situation where there is no force majeure clause. And that has now been laid down by the Supreme Court in Energy Watchdog versus Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, reported in 2004. On the basis of force majeure and a plea on the basis of section 57 cannot lie together. It is this or that. And if there is a force majeure clause, section 56 does not apply. Now, section 56 provides for impossibility of performance. Impossibility of performance is not literal impossibility, but it is practical impossibility. And contrasted with the force majeure clause, the test for application of section 56 is not dependent upon the contractual terms, but is an objective test. It is not dependent upon what parties have agreed or what parties have not agreed. And the consequence of a frustration under section 56 is provided for in section 56 itself. And therefore, the consequence is statutory. In other words, the contract becomes void. That is how section 56 begins. An agreement to do an act impossible in itself is void. Impossibility has been interpreted to mean practical impossibility. Now, therefore, the consequence of frustration under section 56 is provided for in the statute, whereas a consequence arising out of a force majeure clause has to be provided for in the contract. That is the important aspect. Now, let us have one example in order to understand this doctrine of frustration as incorporated in section 56. There is a booking made for a marriage function in a marriage hall. Then comes the lockdown. As on the date of the marriage, there is a lockdown, and therefore the marriage cannot be performed. Now, this might not have been provided for as a force majeure event under the contract at all. In such a situation, the party can rely upon section 56 and say the contract has become practically impossible of performance because the purpose of the contract has been affected. I cannot use the chowtry, the marriage hall for the marriage because of the lockdown. Now, what happens in a situation? I am now concentrating on section 56. Now, what happens if the contract is for the performance of an act over a period of, say, 2 years? The lockdown is for 3 months. Can you then say that I will take recourse to section 56 and then say the contract is frustrated because for 3 months, in a period of 2 years, there was a lockdown? That is not frustration under section 56. You have to show that the agreement was predicated upon an agreed fact situation and that agreed fact situation has ceased to exist, and therefore the agreement or the contract has become irrelevant or votious. Then, if that is shown, which is the law laid down in the Supreme Court in Tarapur and Company versus Cochin Shipyard, if that is shown, then section 56 of the Contract Act will apply. Now, if section 56 is to apply, you should not have a force majeure clause. There should be no possibility of substantial performance. It should not be a self-induced frustration, and the mere fact that the performance has become onerous is no ground for frustration under section 56. When a contract is rendered performable owing to a force majeure clause, then the consequence is also determined not only by the provisions of the contract, but also by section 32, which provides that contingent contracts to do an uncertain future event cannot be enforced, and in which event it becomes void, is what section 32 says. If it becomes void, then it takes us to section 65 of the Contract Act. 65 of the Contract Act provides for restitution. So, in the case where there is a force majeure clause and the contract details what is to be done, what happens as a consequence of the force majeure clause, then the contract will prevail. If there is a force majeure event and nothing else is provided, then one has to fall back upon section 32, read with section 65. What happens if there is frustration under section 56? One has to fall back upon section 65 for remedy. That is restitution. Contrast this with section 73. As I indicated, these are all sister provisions: 56, 32, 65, 73, and one more, namely section 70, which I shall refer to now. When you have frustration or when there is a force majeure, the question of application of section 73 of the Contract Act does not arise, because there is no breach committed by a party, because section 73 postulates that damages can be paid only when there is a breach. And when there is a force majeure event, or when there is a frustration under section 56, there is no breach, and therefore section 73 does not apply. What applies is section 65. What applies would be section 32. What applies would be section 56. Now, in a situation of that kind, where a contract is frustrated, but performance is accepted after the stipulated date in the contract, then can it be said that the party performing the contract is entitled to receive only that consideration which is provided for under the contract and nothing more? Answer is no, because the contract, when a frustration event has happened or when a force majeure event has happened which provides for termination of contract, the contract dies. The contract is no longer in existence. But in spite of the contract not being in existence and the contract not being in force, if the contract is performed and performance is accepted, then the party who has performed is entitled to compensation under section 70 of the Contract Act, namely by the application of the principle of quantum merit. That is the reasonable compensation which is to be paid to him under section 70. So this is the gamut of the law relating to force majeure on the one hand, frustration on the other, damages on the third, restitution on the fourth, all of which have their significant and relevant place. One important judgment which requires to be noted at this stage is the judgment of the Supreme Court in the case of what is called as Energy Watchdog versus the Central Electricity Regulatory Commission. A power plant had entered into power purchase agreements with 3 DISCOMs of 3 different states, and it was a thermal power plant. In other words, power had to be generated by use of coal as the fuel. Coal was to be imported from Indonesia. After the PPA had been entered into and the tariff had been fixed, at which the power had to be supplied to the DISCOMs of the 3 states, the Indonesian government increased tax on coal phenomenally, and therefore it became impossible for the generating company to sell power at the rate as was agreed in the PPA. the generating company filed an application before the Electricity Regulatory Commission seeking for discharging its obligation under the contract because of the increase. The Supreme Court laid down the following propositions, rejecting the case of the generating company, that a force majeure clause has to be narrowly construed. 2, Section 56 has no application because of the presence of a specific force majeure clause. In other words, Supreme Court said Section 56 is a default provision. If you don't have a force majeure clause, then you fall back upon Section 56. Then the third question, the third proposition laid down by the Supreme Court was that there were alternate modes of performance in spite of the change of law. If you could not import it from Indonesia, you could have imported from somewhere else. Fourth, fundamental basis of the power purchase agreement remained unaltered. And there was no condition or a stipulation that the coal has to be imported only from Indonesia. Therefore, the Supreme Court came to the conclusion that in the circumstances having regard to the law, there was no force majeure event. This is the general arena of the law relating to force majeure and frustration. And I shall leave you with by referring to one more important case, which is the case of Subrata Ghosh versus Bangur, reported in 1954 Supreme Court 44. And there the Supreme Court laid down the following propositions. 1, that the doctrine of frustration is an aspect of law relating to discharge of contract. 2nd, that impossibility for the purpose of Section 56 is practical impossibility. And force majeure is excluded by Section 56. 56 operates differently, force majeure clause operates differently. I have provided some food for thought on this aspect, and I hope this will be useful to you. I have learned the law by preparing for this webinar as much as you would have learned something by what I have placed before you. And I hope it is been useful to you and you have spent your time usefully listening to my presentation. Thank you very much, Advocates Association, for giving me this opportunity once again. And thank you, listeners, for spending your valuable time listening to this.
Thank you, sir, for a very comprehensive and very informative presentation. Now, can we move on to the next session, that is the Q&A session?
Sure. Sure.
Jay, request you to unmute all the viewers.
It is done, sir.
Okay. If anybody has any question, you could unmute yourself and put forth your question. I repeat, anybody has a question, you can unmute and you can put forth the question to our beloved speaker. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Gupta, sir, I can see you. You're muted. You will have to unmute and then speak. I think there is some problem with Gupta, sir. Can we go ahead with the next question? We'll later take up that question.
This is Arun Kumar. Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, sir. Yes, Mr. Arun Kumar. Please go ahead.
So I have a question, sir. Do you foresee a circumstance where a force majeure clause could be implied in a contract, although not expressly stated?
Yes, like any other clause can be implied in a contract, a force majeure clause also can be implied. But the burden of proving what is implied and the extent of such implication is very onerous. As I indicated, force majeure is a contractual term. If we can imply any other term, even a force majeure clause can be implied.
Thank you, sir. Can we have the next question, please? can we have the next question, please? Jay, are the viewers facing any problem?
I don't think so, sir. They have the permission to unmute themselves.
Unmute, because I see a lot of them, they are trying to do that. Nevertheless.
There are few questions which are asked in the Q&A box, sir.
I have just gone through, but one or two relevant questions can be taken up. We can take Ms. Kasturi Rajiva's question. Good evening, sir. In the event of construction of building ought to have been completed by, say, October, and in view of pandemic, construction activity is deferred and it becomes impossible to complete as stipulated and agreed. Can builder take defense of force majeure beyond October, considering the fact that the claim of purchaser has not yet occurred presently?
The answer to the question is, was the contractor ready to, in all manner, to complete the construction by October? If the contractor did not have plant and machinery ready, and even without the lockdown, the contractor could not have completed the construction anyway before October, then the contractor cannot take the shelter of a lockdown and say, I could not do it because of the lockdown. Because it is a self-induced default.
Absolutely.
And this is where the principle of causation becomes very important.
Yes, sir. Thank you. We have one more question, sir. In a contract, supplier on receipt of advance amount fails to deliver machinery within the stipulated period of 3 months, citing the reason that there was a stay order by court restraining him to conduct business. Would this amount to force majeure?
If the contractor was, if the supplier was ready to supply and he could not supply because of a court order, the answer is yes. But if the supplier was in any event not ready to supply, then the court order was not an impediment. Because this is where causation becomes very, very important.
Correct. Very true. So Ravi Shankar has a question, but the question is some inputs on landlord and tenant agreements, please. Sir, I will just repeat Mr. Ravi Shankar's question. This question is some inputs on landlord and tenant agreements.
Yes. Section 56 does not apply with respect to landlord and tenant, because I think the law is now fairly well settled that in respect of executed contracts, a tenant cannot say because of the lockdown I am not able to use the premises and therefore I will not pay rent. That is not a ground under Section 56. But in a lease deed, you can provide for any event which you consider as force majeure, and then say, if this happens, I will not pay you the rent.
Correct.
That is the distinction between a force majeure contractual provision and frustration under Section 56.
In fact, Mr. Mithun's question is also on the similar lines, so I wouldn't again read out the question. Mr. Pradeep has a question whether doctrine of frustration can be invoked if the contract becomes onerous due to substantial increase in the price of raw material due to COVID.
The answer is no, unless there is a force majeure clause, not under Section 56. That is the law laid down by the Supreme Court in Alopi Prasad.
So these are the offline questions. I can see Mr. Gupta who has a question, but is not able to unmute. Yes, sir. Harish, sir, you can go ahead. You will have to unmute. So we are not able to hear you, Mr. Harish. Mr. Gupta, sir, you are unmuted now. You can.
Yes, sir.
Your question.
Good evening. How are you, Mr. Raghavan?
I am all right, thank you.
This is Satyanarayana Gupta, advocate.
But sir.
Now you have just now answered one question. When I was not able to unmute it, there's a recent judgment of the Delhi High Court where Justice Pratibha Singh has rendered with regard to the payment of rent or stopping of payment of rent. There's a judgment, sir.
Yes. And what does the Delhi High Court say?
No, what you say, the Delhi High Court says you can't stop to pay the rent.
Correct.
Yes.
So that is the law laid down to the Supreme Court. Because in respect of a landlord-tenant relationship, it is executed contract so far as one party is concerned. Therefore, it is executory only so far as another party is concerned, and therefore 56 does not apply.
The remedy is open to the tenant is only to terminate the lease.
That is if the contract provides for it.
First.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Yes. Sorry to interrupt you, sir. Yes.
I can speak.
Thank you.
Yes, please go ahead.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
This is Harish here. See, in case of all these malls during lockdown, see, in some of the malls, we'll have a revenue sharing option in the lease. Okay. When there is a revenue sharing option, when there is no income at all from the mall because of lockdown, force majeure can be invoked and rent need not be paid during that time.
Yes. Force majeure can be invoked if there is a clause in the contract. You're right. But otherwise, this is the case falling under 56.
Yeah, I agree.
Yes, I agree. If it's a revenue sharing model,
Yeah.
then lockdown will be a defense.
Yeah, the other one is when in a force majeure you say civil commotion is added, is a part of it. Lockdown is nothing but but in the form of a civil commotion itself.
No, lockdown is not civil commotion. Lockdown is statutory.
No, I mean to say people are forced to stay.
No, but no, it's not civil commotion because it's statutory. We are under a duty. No. If we violate it, we will be punished.
Yeah, that is there under the NDMA Act where you are
correct. Disaster Management Act. Exactly. That's the difference between civil commotion. Civil commotion is not anything to do with a law. It is just a protest.
Thank you.
So we have a question offline by Mr. Muralidhar. When there is a clause of assignee, whether the terms of contract is applicable to assignees?
Yes, the answer is yes. Because it is not personal to the party.
Our secretary, Mr. Gangadharaya, has a question, sir.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
How are you, sir?
I am all right. Thank you.
Sir, in a financial transaction, that is a chit business or financial schemes, schemes, sir. A is a financial company, a chit business company. B is one of the subscriber. A chit bid was completed during the initial stage of the, that is somewhere in first week of March. So entire is one of the successful bidder. In the sense, completion of the chit period was over by March. He has to get the money from the chit company by April.
Yes.
So because of the lockdown, they are not able to perform their agreed contract, like handing over the bid amount, chit amount to that B, and whether the B is entitled for the interest with that amount, chit amount, or A can also dodge the issue of handing over the money to lockdown over or lifting of the lockdown like that.
The chit fund company, were they prevented by virtue of the lockdown from remitting the money? Could they not have remitted it online? Therefore, if there was another way in which the chit fund company could have performed its part of the obligation, which had become a debt as of, say, April. The chit money was payable in February. It was only a question of making payment in April. Could they not have done an online transaction?
Yes.
Of course they could have. Therefore, neither force measure will apply, nor frustration will apply. And they cannot take shelter and say, I will not pay the money, I will not pay the interest also. It is wrongful withholding of money.
Thank you.
That's my view.
Do we have any more questions?
Hello.
Before we conclude the session?
Hello.
Yes, sir.
I have one question.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Hello. Good evening, sir. Hello.
Good evening. Good evening.
Sir, in 138 matter, accused had issued the check, and because of the court order, he could not sell the goods. So, so he instructed his bank to stop the payment.
Yes.
So whether that amounts to dishonor of check. I mean, the complainant can approach the court.
Was there a force majeure clause in the contract?
No.
No. Then you'll have to show impossibility of performance under 56. That practically it was impossible for him. Now, what is the type of court order? Did that court order prevent him from performing his obligations?
Yes, sir.
Or could he have procured it from somewhere else and supplied it?
Okay.
It depends upon, what did the court order say? The court order, did you say that you can never effect a supply?
No, it's an intellectual property rights. They prevented him from selling those branded goods.
Therefore, the court came to the conclusion that you did not have title to the property.
Yes.
Namely, the intellectual property. And you were an infringer. And therefore, the court prevented you from selling. Therefore, the default was occasioned by the party himself.
Okay.
It is not something that is out of his control. I mean, he could not have agreed to sell goods which had a trademark of somebody else.
No, sir. Actually, the fact is, the company itself has given the goods to them through the distributor, and he has issued the check to the distributor, and company has filed the case against the seller and sought an injunction. And the distributor has filed 138 matter against the dishonor.
Sir, we need to look at the facts.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Sir,
Do we have
sir,
three more?
Sir, may I have a question, sir?
Please, sir. Please go ahead.
Sir, good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. It is a nice presentation. May I have the question?
Yes.
May I? Yeah. Sir, for example, a contract is invalidated because of frustration on the ground of force measure, but can this contract be revalidated by the parties by a subsequent contract immediately after the event?
Of course, yes. Of course, yes. Of course, yes.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, how we have to read the arbitration clause along with the force majeure clauses? Arbitration clauses in consonance with force majeure.
That should not present any difficulty because arbitration clause stands independent of the other terms of the contract. So today, having regard to the provisions contained in Section 7 of the Contract Act, of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act, and Section 16, an arbitration clause is a clause independent of the main terms of the contract, and therefore the question as to whether force majeure has happened, the question as to whether what is the consequence of force majeure is itself an arbitrable dispute.
Can we incorporate it in agreement explicitly, sir?
Yes, it is possible. It is. Unless a contract has been terminated by mutual consent, as held by the Supreme Court in Damodar Valley Corporation's case, arbitration clause will survive.
Sir, it has to be read along with Order 39 Rule 1 and 2 along with force majeure concepts, because injunctions, a couple of injunctions were being given during this lockdown time, which has affected the rights of the clients, the two senior citizens. In fact, in case of selling
I'm sorry, you're not audible to me.
Instituted OAS. If you are, hello sir, am I audible, sir? Hello sir, am I audible? Hello sir.
Yes. Now you are
not very clear.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Please repeat the question.
Sir, during the lockdown time, there were a couple of injunctions were granted, and if we institute original suit during this time, an emergent notice has been issued. If we are not able to comply and perform selling of a building, when there is an application pending for attachment and injunction, can we take a shelter
No, I think we have the same problem.
Voice is breaking.
Hello.
Professor Mohan Bolla of Kristu Jayanti Law College probably wants to ask something.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Professor Bolla, sir.
I think there is some network issue. They are not able to.
Hello.
Mute, I think.
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
Good evening,
Sir, I am Ravi Kumar.
Please go ahead with your question, sir.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir. Sir, what is the position of law in respect of MSME? If MSME is not perform the contract during the lockdown, can we hold the payment for the FM under the FM, sir?
It is whatever is the law with respect to others is also applicable to MSME. If the contract is frustrated under 56 or it is hit by force majeure clause, then there is no special right given to MSME saying, well, in spite of all that, the MSME is entitled to payment.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Hello, good evening, sir. Trivikram?
Yes, sir.
I have a question. Can I just proceed with?
Please go ahead, sir.
Sir, my question is, if the vendor is ready with the money or the means to procure raw materials on account of court order, if he is unable to supply the finished goods, can it be said that is a reason to impose damages on the supplier, please?
If the supplier was ready in every respect and the court order prevented him from performing his part of the obligation, the answer would be, is there a force majeure clause? If there is no force majeure clause, does it satisfy the requirement of impossibility of performance under Section 56?
Only one more clarification, sir, here. The question is, sir, about procuring the raw materials. For me to finish supply the finished goods, if court order is a restraint, I don't procure raw materials at all. Can the other party to the contract seek damages against me, saying that I wasn't ready with the
Yeah, that is the application of the principle of what is called as Hadley versus Baxendale. Did the supplier of the raw material know that the buyer is seeking to procure for the particular contract in respect of there is an injunction?
Please.
If there was no specific stipulation in the contract saying, I am buying this for this purpose, then he can't take shelter of the court order and say, I won't buy the goods.
To 8 p.m.
Please, thank you, sir.
Officers are up to 8 p.m. Hello?
All right, sir. Can we have the last question, please?
Mr. Trivikram?
Yes, sir. Mr. Rangarajan, sir, please go ahead.
My audio, I'm not able to unmute my audio, video. There is some problem with my video.
Nevertheless, you can put forth your question, sir.
Yeah, please. Mr. Raghavan, Namaskara, Rangarajan Advocate.
Namaskara, sir. Namaskara.
Hegidira.
I'm all right. Thank you very much. How are you?
I'm really thrilled by your discourse and making a wonderful distinction between two separate chapters. One frustration and the other now, my question is very simple.
Yes, sir.
There may be certain facts and circumstances which could be construed as an act of God or mismeasure, could also become a source for frustration of contract. Somewhere it overlaps.
It does. It does.
It does.
It does. But one cannot lay a claim both on force majeure and 56. One has to make a choice.
Right. Correct. I understand and so happy to hear you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. I'm grateful to you for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Hello, good evening, sir.
Yes, sir. Please go ahead with your question, sir. Sir, please go ahead with your question. This would be our last question.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, my name is Mahesh.
Yes, Mahesh.
Now I have a case. Recently, one of my clients has approached me. He has applied. He has become the successful bidder in respect of the shop that was given by the KSRTC in KSRTC bus stand. That tender was called for in the month of February, and he in the month of March first week. He is successful bidder. He was allowed to have a shop in the KSRTC bus stand. That too on a monthly rent of 4 lakh rupees, and he was supposed to pay around 20 lakh rupees advance. Out of which he paid around 5 lakh rupees as EMD. Now, after March 2020, he could not open the shop. He could not have the business. Then he has approached the director of KSRTC and said, the chairman of KSRTC said that he was not able to open the shop because of no business in the KSRTC bus stand, and they have stopped the buses. And he has requested the chairman to return the EMD and also to cancel this tender because of this vis major or whatever it is.
Yes.
Now they are telling they are not able to return the EMD, and they are going to cancel the contract since he is not opened the shop. And also telling he is liable to pay fine for having participated in the tender. Now, can we invoke the clause of this vis major and say that we are not able to do it due to this pandemic? And
I assume that there is no force majeure clause.
No, there is no such clause. But the present situation is now he is not able to do the business. Then how can he do the business without having the customers or the passengers in the bus stand? He is not entitled for this EMD and to rescind the contract.
From what you tell me, I think this is a case falling under 56.
56, and can we not?
And therefore, he is entitled to restitution under section 32.
That's what I suggested him, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's not a case for vis major.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
The last question offline, sir. Advocate Lavanya has that question. Can a notice be served via email? Perhaps this has been answered by the Honorable Apex Court.
Yes.
So I think that's the end of the Q&A session, sir. On my personal behalf, sir, and on behalf of Advocates Association Bengaluru, I thank you for today's wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Raghuvan, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vikram. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We'll be just logging off the session, sir.
Yes.
With your permission. Thank you.